That'll be 4 Wiggums for you, Gentry.
Lady Parakeet eyed the scruffy miner across from Gentry Swallow. Then forcefully placed the other ale on the table with a hard thump. Dark brown liquid sloshed onto the floor.
9 Wiggums for this one.
Goddard didn't pay the whorish woman any mind as her bright orange wings shoved him to the side when she walked past.
Sorry about that, old fella.
Gentry passed the older male a cloth rag from his pants pocket. Goddard smiled faintly and took a sip of his lukewarm ale before sliding his glass to the corner of the worn oak wood table.
Well, we certainly did not come here for pleasantries. So, what can I do for you, sir?
Goddard knew his shift manager had questions, but he wasn't going to be loose-lipped about any of the miners' dealings. Gentry leaned back on his stool, fluffing his wings slightly as he turned to face the eldest of his mining team.
What's your rush, old-timer? You've earned this drink. Hell, the whole team has just about cleared Tunnel 27 out.
Goddard shrugged and looked towards the upper level of the tavern. Several scantily clad Fire Tribe females solicited themselves to whoever was willing to pay the right price. Gentry noticed where the older male's eyes lingered, then asked,
Ah. Is that where you'd rather spend your hard-earned Wiggums?
The old man frowned. The deep ridges on his face furrowed with disgust.
Nah, sir, have you ever wondered what happens when a Fire Tribe, or should I say flightless? I believe that is what our kind calls them after one of those females gets pregnant, after whoring.
Gentry scratched his sunburnt face, a bit surprised by the sudden question.
I can't say that it crossed my mind. I haven't visited the upper decks since I was an adolescent.
Gentry took a sip of his hawk-eyed ale, hissing as the faint sting of the liquor burned the back of his throat. Goddard chuckled, then turned to face his shift manager. A serious expression blanketed his face.
No matter who bets, a Fire Tribe female, the babe will come out with fiery red hair.
Goddard pointed to the tangled mass of grey and red curls on the top of his head.
You see, Fire Tribe genes are quite strong. For this reason, our women are often used to fill our houses, our work as noble bed slaves. No matter who bets her, she will simply give birth to more slaves. The fucker that knocks her up can walk away, with no proof our claim to the life he helps create.
Gentry put his ale down, since the tone of the conversation caused his mood to sour.
I've always been an ally of the flightless. Never have I treated you or your people as if you were less. So why must you talk to me as if I'm your enemy?
Goddard apologized for his indignant remarks and allowed the mood to lighten as the two shared stories and drank ale.
Gentry, the crew members, have all decided on this month's reward.
Have they now? What will it be this time?
Goddard leaned forward.
Water, soap, and fresh vegetables.
After stating the miners' demands, he sat back on his stool. If they could get the youngling's basic staples, caring for the youngling would be a bit easier. Plus, a wee babe like her could heal better if she had the proper nutrition. The puzzled look on Gentry's face made Goddard nervous. Fearing that he asked for too much, he began to negotiate a bargain.
If I say never mind to the soap, will you be willing to give us fruit instead?
Fruit and vegetables? What kind of game are you playing? Do you think I'm a fool?
Goddard looked around nervously, thinking he made his intentions too obvious. The last thing they needed was for the Deviance to find out that the little one was in their care. So he hurriedly rose from his bar seat.
If it is too much, forget it. It is best I get back. I do not want the night patrol giving me a hard time for breaking the curfew.
After throwing 10 Wiggums on the oak wood table, Goddard walked off, bidding Gentry good night.
1, 2, 3. Can you write it one more time? Yes, but pay attention. Okay.
Minnow shook her head, then eagerly watched as a small piece of charcoal etched out each number. Her eyes follow each stroke and curve by his hands. Knock knock. Luke pushed Minnow in the small crook by the wall of Goddard's bunk, then tossed a heaping pile of covers and sheets on top of her head.
Coming. I was changing my clothes.
Luke shuffled to the door, tugging and pulling on his clothing, hoping it made him appear more disheveled.
Oh, Sir Gentry. What brings you by at this late hour?
Gentry cocked his brow. It was only 2 hours after the 3 moons were raised.
I was hoping Goddard had returned. But I see that I have been hasty. I'll come by tomorrow then.
Achoo!
Gentry surveyed the room, then squinted his eyes as a big pile of clothing suddenly sprouted red hair. Gentry stumbled over his own wings as he hurtled forward, with trembling hands, snatching the massive pile of clothing aside.
By the mother, who the hell is that?
Gentry was furious. By the time Goddard returned to the miners' dormitory, the entire Tunnel 27 crew was standing at attention, awaiting his return. It didn't take him long to realize he had been caught red-handed.
So, this is where all your rations have been going?
Gentry eyed the 40 so labor-hardened males standing in front of him. No one answered him. Each of them stood tight, lipped with fearful expressions. Goddard's eyes were filled with tears as he held the tiny hand of the small child wearing a burlap dress tied with a rope string. The young child's pale skin had a faint blue tinge. Her fiery red hair was braided back in thick plaits, but her big brown eyes made Gentry's stomach tighten. The way the youngling looked at him made him feel like a monster. As if he was everything the girl feared.
Please don't burn me, demon.
Gentry bent down and looked the little girl in the eye.
By the mother. Why would you think I would do such a thing?
But the big wings in the rock tunnel down there threw all those bodies in the fire hole. Then whoosh, there was a pretty stone.
What did she say? Did I hear her wrong? The miners began to talk all at once. Never before had the youngling told them where she came from. Goddard gripped the little one by her shoulder with a firm hand.
My dear girl, did you really see such a thing?
Minnow shook her head, afraid that something was wrong with how all the males were acting. Gentry tried to settle the miners down. But everyone was up in arms.
Shush, I get that you're all upset, but if you get too loud, the other shift managers may come.
With a nod, Gentry gestured for Goddard to continue questioning the babe.
Little one, where do you hail from?
Minnow looked around Gentry with fearful eyes, then hid behind Luke.
We were saved from the jails.
Jails? What jails? Maybe we heard her wrong. The miners may not have understood. But Gentry's heart raced with understanding. This youngling was one of the missing king's slaves.
Little one, did you escape from the king's prison?
Minnow was about to answer him. But Goddard abruptly placed his large, scarred hands over her mouth. Gentry rose from his kneeling position. The feathers on his back fluttered in frustration.
Goddard, what's the meaning of this? You know my brother was framed for helping her and the other slaves escape. If I can prove his innocence, the people will see just how corrupt King Peacock truly is.
And what of it?
Goddard puffed his chest out as he pushed Minnow behind him.
So what, your brother was innocent. The king did not care then, and the slumlords will definitely find a way to silence it. But at what cost?
The other miners voiced their agreement with Goddard's words.
But can my brother come home?
Gentry's pleas were falling on deaf ears.
But what of our fire tribe females? They are alone, lost out there in the wilderness. They escaped the hell of the capital only to venture out into a crueler hell.
Gentry felt defeated. Of course, the miners weren't wrong. Anyone would want to save their own.
Shift manager.
Luke stepped forward, and the young male lifted his chin to appear more mature as he talked.
Since your brother was banished to the dark forest, and if what the youngling says is true, the women are also there. So, wouldn't it make more sense for us to work together?
Gentry looked at the pale-faced male in front of him. His dark red hair stopped short of his shoulders. But the look on the young male's reminded him of his own. It was full of determination and pride. Gentry rubbed his calloused hand over his face, stealing the faint grin that quirked the corners of his lips.
You know, I've always wanted to play the hero. It's my brother's turn to play the damsel in distress.
Since Gentry's crew was over 3 weeks ahead of schedule, no one would come looking for them if a handful of miners went missing.
Are you sure the miners we left behind can be trusted?
Gentry turned his head slightly, looking back at the rocky pathway that led back to the mines. Luke adjusted Minnow's leg straps higher up on his torso, then pulled the burlap sack that she was nestled in higher into his shoulders. Once he reaffirmed she was good, he pushed forward. Goddard eyed Gentry with mixed emotions. Indeed, he was always kind-hearted towards the miners. As a shift manager, he was the most just and fair. But this was a serious crime, treason. If he was caught, King Peacock wouldn't just stop at persecuting him. His entire family would have to pay for his crime. Goddard held his hand up, gesturing for the 15 miners that opted to come with them to keep still.
Gentry. This is the last time I will question you. Are you truly with us?
Gentry nodded. The string that restricted Gentry's wings squeezed tighter as he pushed his chest out and held his breath. The miners had warned him that his large wings would get in his way, so they tied them down flat against his back. But Gentry's wings had a mind of their own. Every so often, the miner behind him would extinguish a wayward feather that had gotten too close to smoldering rocks. Then, with a nod of thanks, they kept moving further into the rocky core, where the volcanic heat scorched everything around them. Insanity. Deep, deep in the hollow earth, is a chamber where the ruler of this small world rests, blinded by her obsessive love. Her ivory talons tenderly stroke the golden sarcophagus beneath her hands, affectionately tracing over its gemstone and diamond-encrusted filigree patterns.
Soon, my love, I'll have enough gemstones to resurrect you.
Her fiery red eyes glowed with a manic expression, and she turned her head to the bedroom chamber door.
Who dares to disturb me?
Her powerful voice caused the entire temple to quake. The priest fell to his knees before the avian guards blocking the Great Mother's door.
My goddess, please have mercy. For I bring news from King Peacock. He wishes to have just a moment of your time.
The phoenix rolled her eyes, then placed a soft kiss upon her husband's sarcophagus, ignoring the priest's pleas for an audience.
He also states that he has collected some of the purest soul gems. So if you would like, you can have them.
With slothful steps, the phoenix mother rose from the silky sheets of her bed, then grabbed a sheer tunic that sat upon her armoire. The sheer fabric caressed her supple tan skin and slid over the stiff peaks of her dark brown nipples, but did very little to hide the bare mound between the junction of her slender thighs.
The Great Mother comes forth.
The chamber guards yelled out in unison as she strode out of her bedchamber.
Bless the wings of the mother.
The priest and guards kneeled in supplication, placing their heads upon the cool, hard ground, allowing the wings of their backs to flutter in exhalation and praise.
Tell the king I'm in the mood for pleasure. For new avians shall be conceived tonight. But only if his gems are to my liking.
The priest's lust-reddened face smiled as he gazed upwards, staring into the flowery folds of the great phoenix.
Yes, yes, my goddess. I shall tell him with great haste.
The iridescent soul gem in the phoenix's palm glittered when held to the light. She studied it slowly, twisting and turning it, inspecting every imperfection. Her face twisted into a scowl until she pushed King Peacock's head to the right. Then, with a frustrated grunt, he continued lapping at the tender bud nestled between her dripping folds.
Where did you say you got this?
Her fiery red eyes looked at the somewhat attractive male kneeling between her legs. His long, dark green hair shimmered in the firelight of her throne room. The king looked upwards seductively. His emerald eyes stared into her tumultuous orbs, while tracing his tongue languidly over her clitoris.
One of the night orders came upon a lower being in the forest.
He spread her labia wider, flicking her clit once more before continuing.
I believe it was a mare beast or horse of some sort.
She grunted, unable to voice her opinion as an orgasm stole her breath away. King Peacock pushed his tongue harder against her throbbing bud, sending the goddess to the heavens with his masterful tongue. When her body finally settled, he rose from the floor. His long train of feathers decorated the floor behind him with eye-like patterns of bright blues and browns.
My Empress.
The slender male spread his plumage while cupping his erect penis in the palms of his hand. The great phoenix sighed, somewhat satisfied by the king's talents. With a swift kick of her leg, he fell to the floor. Before he could rise, he found himself forced back down by the heel of her bare foot.
Is there anything else you would like to share?
The phoenix questioned him. Her sheer gem-covered gown sparkled and danced as she leaned forward, as she pressed the ball of her foot firmly into the king's chest. His long fingers gripped and scratched at the marble floor as he longingly stared at the beautiful goddess above him.
Yes.
He screamed out in pleasure, shivering as her foot traveled down his taut abdominal muscles. But his happiness was short-lived when her foot stopped just above his pulsing erection.
Please, please, my great mother, crush me.
He begged, his face ravished with drool and tears.
What else do you need to speak to me about?
Her tone was raspy and seductive.
I.
The king stammered, jerking when her toes traced the outer rim of his scrotum sap.
I finally got rid of Sir Micah.
The phoenix's face twisted into an indescribable manic expression at the mention of Micah's name.
Repeat that.
Her left foot pressed downwards on the king's cock. He howled in ecstasy.
Yes, fuck yes. I finally got rid of him, my goddess.
But, this time, it was the Great Mother that screamed in ecstasy. The news of the blight of her bloodline finally being removed was more orgasmic and satisfying than any cock could ever be. Insanity Part 2.
By the merciful Father, how did such a wee child walk such a treacherous path?
Goddard looked back at the small youngling satchel to Luke's back. The tunnel was scorching hot and dark. It had to be divine mercy that she made it as far as she did.
There, up ahead, where there is a shining light.
The youngling whispered in Luke's ear. He turned his head. Perspiration dripped from his dark red tresses.
Okay, I'll tell them, the babe says at the end of the tunnel.
Everyone got into position. If there were avians in the chamber ahead, all of them would have to prepare themselves to fight. Goddard inched closer to the mouth of the chamber, watching and assessing for any presence. When the coast was clear, he waved everyone over. Gentry strode to the front, baffled by the scene before him. The chamber was full of beast carcasses and the burnt corpses of flightless slaves, each of them with a hollowed-out heart.
What is all this?
He looked back at the flightless miners, who also looked at the gruesome scene around them with rage-filled eyes.
The youngling spoke the truth.
One of them whispered aloud. Goddard worked up the nerve to walk closer to the lava-filled chasm, his skin blistering and burning the closer he drew near. With a quick motion, he peeked into the fiery abyss, only to stumble backward while shielding his eyes. Gentry ran over, stabilizing the old miner.
What? What is it?
A diamond.
Muttered Goddard as he rubbed his stinging eyes.
A gem brighter than I have ever seen.
Gentry looked at the old man with confusion, but the sound of footsteps caused them all to scurry into the adjacent tunnel, headed towards the lagoon cave. Prophecy foretold. Just beyond the temple in the ruined city sat a citadel. Its highest point barely reached the lowest hanging tree root from up above. Micah and Nemala had decided upon bunkering down in its innermost chamber.
What has you so worked up, Nemala?
Micah lovingly stroked the coppery brown coils of Nemala's hair, watching as the lustrous corkscrews bounced and danced between his fingers. Nemala nestled herself deeper into the crook of his arm, studying the white and ivory shafts and veins of his feathers. When I first woke up here. She paused, turning her body somewhat to face his. I helped the Fire Tribe women, placing myself in danger to set them free. But the moment I moved of my own accord, they showed their venomous fangs. Micah looked at the beautiful brown woman lying on his chest and sighed.
You owe them nothing, Nemala. You gave them freedom. It's up to them to save themselves from here on out.
Nemala placed her chin on his pectorals. Her lilac eyes studied the furrowed wrinkles above his brow. Then, in a loving gesture, her small hand smoothed them out. Your face is too handsome for that. Micah's chest vibrated with a hearty laugh. The golden scales on his chest glittered in the firelight from the torches as he rose to stand.
You owe no one here anything. Do what you please. Go where you will. I only pray you allow me to at least walk in your shadow.
Nemala's heart swelled with warmth, watching in fascination as the ethereal man before her pledged his undying loyalty.
I know not from whence you came, but I know with every fiber of my soul that I was meant for you, and you were meant for me.
Nemala rose from the floor and walked to Micah's side, embracing him as they looked at the city of ruins below.
While you were gone, the feline beast told me of my origin.
Nemala kissed his chest softly. Will you tell me as well?
Of course. As we believed, the Great Father was betrothed to the Phoenix Mother. He was the god of nature and the seas. And she was the goddess of fire and creation. For many years, they loved one another. Until the father began to lust for more. He fell in love with several lower goddesses.
Nemala pointed to the broken monument in front of the temple. Micah nodded his head and continued.
First, he bedded the beast goddess Nitio, from whom all the beastkin are derived from. Then Cicada is the goddess of the Fae and insects.
Micah pointed to the insectoid female to the right of the Great Father's statue.
But he didn't stop there. The Great Mother only lost herself to jealousy when he bedded her younger sister, the Queen of the Fire Tribe. For years, the Great Mother sealed herself away in anger from her husband and sister wives, concentrating on raising and birthing her own avian kin. But all hell broke loose when the Great Phoenix's firstborn son wed the descendant of a mixed-race kin.
A mixed race. Micah moved his hand, cupping the nape of Nemala's neck, possessively stroking her skin.
Yes, my love.
He bent down and kissed the soft brown skin of her ear.
Miski said my birth mother was mixed with all the other races except avian. Her parents were also mixed race as well. So within me resides every bloodline. The first avian with a mixed heritage. My birth and existence was the final insult the Great Phoenix would take. After that, she became insane, killing everyone and everything. Even the husband she loved so dearly.
Micah turned his back to the city of ruins and gestured for Nemala to lie with him on a bed of leaves and soft twigs.
When the phoenix came to her senses, it was too late. She sought out the surviving priest, asking them if there was any way to undo what she had already done. And they told her she alone was not enough to sustain the life of this world. So she burned the rest of the world with her phoenix fire, leaving only enough land for her children, the avians. Imprisoning the surviving wives' descendants to the dark forest and made her sister's children into slaves.
Nemala climbed up the top of Micah's body, straddling his muscular frame between her thighs. Then what of the soul gems? Micah dragged her gown down, exposing her voluptuous melons and dark chocolate peaks.
She must be collecting them. Even the insectoid and beastkin don't know.
Micah lowered his head and suckled Nemala's hardened nipples, as her talented hands went to work, diligently freeing his erect penis from his trouser pants. After several rounds of intense lovemaking, the pair's libidos were finally sated. But, since the subterranean cavern was deep underground, the passage of time went unnoticed. Nemala rose from her bed of soft foliage, watching as Micah's chest rose and fell with every exhalation. It felt right with him. As if the person beside her was home. Home, she whispered. Her soft voice was enough to rouse Micah from his slumber.
Beloved?
I've decided. Nemala smiled faintly. The tone of her voice caused Micah to sit up abruptly. His massive wings threw the leaves and twigs from their makeshift bed.
Nemala?
The prophecy said the child of the foremothers will change the land. Micah eyed Nemala with curiosity. She turned to him and placed his rough, calloused hand on top of her heart. You made your pledge to me, and I will make my pledge to you. Claim your rightful place as the Great Father's descendant. Save this land, so that we may have a place to call home. Nemala's voice trembled as a lone tear fell from Micah's luminous golden eyes.
Home?
His husky voice whispered as he passionately kissed Nemala on the mouth. Yes, home. She smiled as he once again ravished and passionately claimed her body. After washing themselves in a small stream of water spilling from the brown root of the tree, Nemala and Micah went to gather the others. Nemala was only somewhat surprised to find Torah and the insectoid naked. With all of his 8 hands possessively embracing the pale redhead in his arms. Micah coughed hard, hoping to wake the pair from their slumber. Torah shrieked when she awoke, finding Nemala standing there.
Insectoid, dress and come to the square. We need to talk.
Micah folded his arms as his voice commanded their attention. Nemala's eyes fell to the 2 large, bulbous erections pointing her way. His cocks weren't as thick as Micah's, but there were 2, so each had its own charm. The insectoid grinned when he noticed where Nemala was looking.
Impressive, isn't it?
He chided.
And I have a name now, it's Fortis. Torah screamed it all night long.
Torah's face reddened. Then she slapped Fortis on his chest, stomping away with her tattered gown in hand. Micah shook his head and bristled his feathers, pushing Nemala away towards the city square. Nemala giggled while Micah fussed at her the entire way.
Why were you looking at his cocks?
Nemala could only laugh harder the more upset he became. When Micah called everyone over to the fire pit, everyone was up in arms. With the gesture of his hand, everyone silenced.
I've decided to claim my birthright.
Both Miski and Fortis stepped forward.
Are you seriously a dummy? Do you really think you will be king?
Torah slapped him again and pulled Fortis to her side. Nemala watched, humored by the small redhead's ability to tame the rough warrior. Miski was back on her humanoid form, to Nemala's disappointment. She sauntered forward, eyeing Micah from head to toe. Her long tail slapped the ground behind her.
If you become king, what of my beast kin?
Micah stood tall and addressed her.
I will do my best to restore it all. But I will need help from all the foremothers' kin.
Micah turned to the insectoid. Fortis had all 8 of his arms folded. An annoyed expression plastered over his ruggedly handsome face. When Torah gave him a look, the big brute finally acknowledged Micah.
If you do right by my kin, and allow me to wed this one, I'm in.
Everyone's jaws dropped open as they turned to look at Torah. She, too, was surprised by Fortis' demand, causing her to weep and cry in jubilation.
But father, I have not attended a wedding in over 60 years, it saddens me that he is not of our own. But alas, it could have been years, at least he is not a wind demon.
The grey-haired elder clapped her hands and hugged Torah. Nemala smiled wearily, only to smile harder when she noticed Micah staring at her with a look of resolution. Then let us make haste. But we must find the youngling first. Nemala interjected, causing Fortis and Miski to look her way.
Yes, we will help you find the youngling. then amass the help of our kindred.
Fortis grasped Micah's forearm with one of his free arms. Miski purred in agreement.
This will mean war. But I am ready to fight the mother.
Nemala knew this battle wouldn't be easy. But it was a war they had to fight. Let us eat, then head back towards the cave. Maybe we can find some clues. King Griffin.
There are signs of a fire pit, a few scraps of clothing, and food debris, so someone was definitely here.
One miner yelled back to Goddard.
Over here. I found the same.
Luke loosened his satchel to let Minnow down from off his back. Goddard approached the young babe, squeezing her cheeks as she smiled with a gummy grin.
Minnow, can you show me around the cave?
The small child grabbed his hand, excited to show the male elder her favorite spots and hopping frogs. As the two walked away, Gentry also got comfortable, untying the ropes on his back so his wings could be free. After several flaps and stretches, he called out to his men.
We know for certain they were here. Let's camp here tonight. Someone grab some kindling to make a fire. I'll take 2 with me to fish or hunt some wild game.
Gentry crouched down by the murky green water, patiently watching as a catfish bobbed its head above the water's surface. Then quickly swam back in between the water reeds. His eyes darted to the left, then right. Then, splash, with a quick slap, the catfish was knocked onto the muddy embankment.
That makes 8 altogether.
After scraping off the scales with a sharpened rock, Luke spiked each fish with a wooden branch.
Do you think that'll be enough, Gentry?
Don't move, boy.
Gentry's body tensed as he noticed the green, glowing eyes of a beast several steps away from Luke. Unbeknownst to them, the creature had moved in to make a kill. Luke trembled, too afraid to turn and look at the predator stalking him. Gentry inched closer slowly.
When I tell you to move, run into the water.
Luke answered with his eyes, blinking slowly to show he understood. The snapping of a tree branch was the only warning the creature gave before it leaped from the bush.
Now!
Gentry yelled. Luke darted into the water, but was slashed across the back by the claws of the panther beast. Rah! The beast swinged its claw at Gentry, but he used his wings to propel himself upwards, evading the panther beast's claw.
Swim, Luke, swim to the cave and get the others. I'll distract it and lead it away.
Luke winced as he waded his arms. The murky green water was soon reddened by his blood.
Yah yah.
Gentry waved his hands and yelled at the panther, swooping down to antagonize it, coercing it to only pay attention to him. The panther leaped higher than expected, snatching Gentry's secondary feathers from his body. Gentry yelled as he plummeted towards the dogwood bush beneath him. Just as the panther leaped into the air to deliver its killing blow, it was knocked aside. Meow, ski hiss. A blur of black and orange was all Gentry could make out as the two felines pawed at each other with rapid claw strikes. Blood splattered the floor when the larger feline tore the muzzle of the panther. The wounded beast licked at its gaping wound, eyeing the larger feline with a look of surrender, then bounded off into the forest. Miski turned her head backward, eyeing the avian that sat upside down in the dogwood bush with a look of confusion. Her yellow eyes studied him from the tip of his mangled brown wings to his darkly tanned skin and rugged, dirty appearance. He was unlike any of the avians she had seen before. Misty flicked her whiskers with her paw, attempting to rid her mouth of the foul taste of the panther's fur. Gentry held his breath. He was even more fearful of the large cat in front of him than he was of the panther. Its head alone was twice the size of his. But Miski made no move towards him. But she enjoyed the scent of fear the peculiar upside-down avian gave off. Miski, Miski. Where did she run off to? A woman's voice echoed a ways back from where Gentry was positioned. He cocked his head to the side but kept his eyes on the predator in front of him. The large cat didn't move from where it sat today. Instead, it lowered its large body to the ground. hiding its body amongst the shrubs instead of making its presence known to the female, calling out some name. Gentry's heart quickened. How could he let an innocent woman be attacked by the beast? So he took a deep breath and screamed for her to run away.
Woman! If you can hear me, run to the water's cave. There are men that can protect you there.
The forest went silent. The cat snapped her head in his direction with a look that could kill.
That's right, beast, keep your attention on me, creature.
A low rumble of annoyance bellowed from Miski's throat. Who are you? Nemala yelled out.
Never mind me, woman, if you're one of the fire tribe women. I'm here to help.
The forest went quiet again. Gentry watched the beast just as much as it watched him. Since it hadn't attacked yet, he took the gamble and shifted his body right side up. To his dismay, the bush gave way, uprooting from the ground, sending him tumbling face first towards the beast.
Shit!
Gentry tensed his body, certain that he had taken his last breath. The cat beast would surely kill him now. So Gentry closed his eyes, for he had no desire to look death in the eye.
Gentry.
Gentry clenched his eyes down harder and tensed some more. Damn, have I already crossed over into the nether realm? His mind wondered.
Gentry Swallow, the fuck are you doing here?
A faint smile tickled the edges of Gentry's scruffy face.
By the fates, Micah's in the nether realm, too. But, at least in death, I will be amongst family.
What's wrong with him? He has a weird look about him. A female voice questioned. Gentry's face screwed up into a scowl. Then he brought his hands to his face while slowly opening his eyes. Micah stood over him with a concerned expression on his face.
What are you doing here, brother?
Gentry's hand moved to his heart, feeling frantically for a heartbeat as a manic laugh possessed him.
Well, fuck me, I'm alive.
He laughed out loud. Micah shook his head at his older brother's antics, extending his hand out for Gentry to rise. But Gentry knocked his hand away and pulled Micah into a heartfelt embrace.
Brother.
Gentry could feel the burning sting of his tears swelling up in the corners of his eyes. So he buried his face in Micah's chest and wept.
Come now, Gentry, it's all right.
Micah whispered into his brother's hair.
I'm fine, I'm alive.
But even his voice began to tremble with emotion. Nemala stood off to the side, avidly watching the two men lament their sorrows. Her nose tickled as tears fell down her soft brown cheeks. Miski pranced over, alarmed by Nemala's tears. With the back of her hand, Nemala wiped her face. I'm good, Miski. It was just an emotional moment. Miski nodded her head, then went on with grooming herself. When Micah noticed Nemala's expression, he released his brother and hurriedly went to Nemala's side.
Are you okay, my love?
Nemala stroked his stubble jaw, then mouthed yes. Gentry's face was a mask of confusion. The dark-skinned woman in his brother's embrace was otherworldly. Her skin and hair were of the same hue except for the buttery brown highlights mixed between a few strands. Her body was plump, yet muscular. His eyes moved over her womanly curves. She was shaped nothing like any avian. The most noticeable difference was that she didn't have wings.
Brother.
Micah looked at Gentry at the sound of his name. When he noticed his brother's perplexed expression, he chuckled a bit and then pulled Nemala to stand at his side.
Brother, we have much to discuss.
Nemala. Is that really you?
The sound of a shrill voice had Nemala burst into tears of elation. Minnow, my dear little one. Nemala couldn't run fast enough towards the tiny red-haired child being held in an older male's arms. The ruffling of a nearby shrub snatched everyone out of their revelry. When Fortis stepped forward, the miners held their axes and hammers high in the air, ready to attack. But Tora soon came tumbling out behind him. Her fiery red hair was a mess of leaves and twigs. Nemala shot Fortis a contemptuous look. Fortis folded several of his arms and shrugged with the rest.
What? Ah, don't be so tight-lipped. We just stopped for a quick thrusting.
Tora slapped him hard before Nemala could even give her rebuttal. When she noticed the red hair of the miners, Tora's knees began to shake.
By the father, I haven't seen any of my male kin in 10 years.
As the 3 moons raised high in the sky, the sound of laughter and good-natured jesting could be heard echoing from the lagoon cave. The loudest of them all was Fortis, as he dramatically told the miners stories of his battles and conquest here in the dark forest. Luke looked at the insectoid with avid interest as he imagined a whole new world outside the dusty mines and whore-filled red-light districts. But Goddard was quiet. A sullen expression was etched deep upon the male's weather-worn face.
What has you so quiet, old-timer?
Gentry nudged the older man with the shaft of his wing. But Goddard just looked into the firelight. The red flames partially obscured his view of Minnow sitting on the brown-skinned woman's lap.
How do we know you all can be trusted?
Everyone stopped talking and laughing. The mood suddenly went cold. Micah squeezed Nemala's shoulders before replying.
I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you, when? Will it be enough? When will you and your kin stop suffering?
Goddard threw a twig into the flickering flame.
Do you want to speak in riddles with me, Avian? I've seen what your kind does right there in that chasm. We are of no use to you if it is not whoring us out, using us as laborers, or stealing our soul gems.
Goddard spat on the ground in anger. The large feline at Nemala's footside suddenly shone with a dazzling array of golden light. Before everyone, Misky morphed into her nude humanoid form. Her small pert breast jiggled slightly as she rose from all fours. Gentry's mouth dropped open. The ethereal woman in front of him was radiant. He wanted to look away, but his eyes were enraptured by the tuft of black and orange hair lightly covering the apex of her thighs. Misky. Not in front of the youngling, Nemala hissed as she covered Minnow's eyes.
That's nothing. I've seen a winged demon stick his.
Nemala covered Minnow's mouth and whispered something in the babe's ear to keep her quiet.
By the father, cover that shit up.
Barked Fortis.
I'll end up vomiting if I look upon you any longer.
Misty shrugged her shoulders, then snapped her fingers, instantly conjuring up a dark-colored tunic. Then sauntered slowly towards the elder's side.
Speak again about the soul gems. What do you mean?
Goddard's wrinkled face was beet red. His lip quivered as he looked at the other miners for help, but each of them turned their faces and looked the other way.
Aye.
He ran his hand through his matted red and grey hair.
In the tunnel, there's a chasm.
Misky turned her head, eyeing the alien next to the older male. Gentry continued, his dark brown eyes looking into her slanted, golden orbs.
There's a dozen, if not more, bodies of flightless and beast alike. All with their chest ripped open.
Misky growled abruptly, turning her head to Fortis and Micah.
This is worse than we imagined.
Fortis sat forward leaning four of his arms upon his thick, muscular thighs.
We thought she was simply stealing the mana from the soul gems.
Misky nodded her head in anguish.
If she started taking the soul gems in their entirety, then she has something much more sinister planned.
Micah and Nemala both shook their heads. Now, more than ever, the Great Mother had to be defeated.
So as I said, Elder, you don't have to trust me. But I swear to you, we're fighting a similar cause. The Great Mother has to be defeated if you want your people, your kin to survive.
Gentry looked at his brother. The firelight reflecting off his golden scales and white wings made him look regal.
I will fight with you, brother.
Gentry stood and placed a fist across his chest.
And I'm sure the Griffin Knight Order would stand in arms with you as well.
The next to rise was Fortis.
I've never been one to shy away from a battle.
To everyone's surprise, Luke rose next.
I will not live and die with a hammer in my hand. If I must, I'd rather die fighting.
Then, the other miners rose to their feet with a resolute yell, pledging to fight beside Micah. The only one sitting was still Goddard. Minnow wiggled free of Nemala's lap and skipped over to Goddard.
If the mother falls, does that mean we can all be a family?
Goddard's eyes watered at hearing the youngling's question. Her little pale hands wiped his rough cheeks as best she could.
If you're afraid, I'll fight her with you.
Goddard grabbed the young babe and hugged her to his chest tightly.
For you, little one, I would fight the entire Imperial army.
Then, with the help of Minnow, the elder stood and placed his fist over his heart. King Griffin Part 2. Rohan Emu pointed towards the makeshift map on the oakwood table in Lady Peacock's tavern.
If we are going to do this, we will have to enter the castle through the lower prisons.
Hawk shook his head in disagreement.
No, ever since the slaves escaped, the royal guards there have more than tripled.
Raven and Rohan nodded with like-mindedness.
Exactly. They would never think their most guarded place would be the focal point of our attack.
Vulture sat with his black wings tucked tight. Out of all of Micah's men, he was the only one hesitant.
And what of our families and the other men?
Rohan sighed, then took a sip of his Hawkeye ale.
You act as though we don't have the same concerns as you. My hatchling is barely a year old.
Hawk raised his hand and placed it on his comrade's shoulder.
Micah and Gentry's mother has already stolen away to the City of Ruins. You can either send them there or purchase a room here in the Red Light District. We have proclaimed this area neutral because many fire tribesmen reside here.
Vulture chugged the rest of his drink, then slammed the mug against the table.
There's no way I'll bring my hatchlings to the whorehouses. They leave out for the City of Ruins within the next fortnight.
It had taken months of meticulous preparation, but the eve of the great battle was approaching. So the miners went back to work as if nothing was amiss, secretly recruiting and digging channels towards the great temple. To Goddard's dismay, many of the miners refused to fight alongside them, content with the life they currently led. Miski and Fortis were also surprised by the lack of fighters from their kindred. There was no question among the beastkin and insectoid tribes that still had consciences. They were all willing to fight, but there were very few that had already fully descended into their animal forms. Instead, they opted to live the remainder of their lives as regular dark forest creatures. Nemala sat upon the windowsill of the citadel, looking down at a city that was now bustling with citizens from the mixed kindred. With word spreading through the dark forest of King Griffin's return, the City of Ruins had turned into a flourishing subterranean haven. Zhen whined and yelped, pulling Nemala from her daydream. It was no surprise that of all the lower beings, the Silver Wolf Pack was the first to call the City of Ruins home. Zhen would rarely leave Nemala's side, unless Micah ran the male wolf off. But when Micah was busy training, she would sneak the gallant wolf extra belly rubs and scratches. Knock, knock, Zhen growled at whoever stood outside the door of her chamber.
It is me, Nemala. I have brought Minnow with me.
The husky voice of the grey-haired elder was muffled by the metal door of her bedchamber. Zhen growled again, but Nemala swatted at his bum. Hush now. It's only the elder. Nemala walked to the door. The silky fabric from her dark teal tunic clung to her body like a second skin. When Nemala opened the door, she was taken aback by Minnow's appearance. The little one's eyes were hazed over and foggy. Nemala lowered herself to her knees. The jewels of her tunic pressed into her flesh as she sat upon her knees. Minnow, dear girl, what has happened to you? Nemala shook the young girl's shoulder, then looked at the grey-haired elder to her side. Speak. What is this? Power coursed through her voice as she rose to her full height. The grey-haired elder lowered her head in shame.
She and the beastkin children were playing by the fountain. One of those horrid beasts gave her some catnip to try.
Nemala eyed the grey-haired elder with suspicion, then nodded her head. This is truly unfortunate. The elder shrugged her shoulders as well.
Yes, it is.
I will lay the little one upon my nesting bed. Then you can take me to the children's mothers. Things like this cannot be allowed within the city. The elder's eyes gleamed with satisfaction.
Yes, my queen, I can certainly take you.
Nemala stepped to the side and waved for the grey-haired elder to bring Minnow inside. The older woman toddled and swayed as she shuffled forward, gently pulling Minnow to Nemala's bed. Nemala tucked Minnow neatly under her plush feather blanket, then whispered into Zhen's ear. Guard the babe. After I leave, tell your wolves to inform the guards. Zhen quickly snapped into action, leaping onto the bed and laying his head over the little one's lap. Nemala smiled at the elder watching her. He's such a loyal beast. The elder returned her smile with a faint grin.
Yes, I see. Shall we be off, my queen?
Yes, lead the way. The two walked through the town square. Everyone greeted Nemala with warm salutations and cheers. Bless you, Nemala. May your morning be merciful, Nemala. Fates be with you. The grey-haired elder watched as Nemala smiled and waved at the rabbit beastkin that handed her a beautiful lilac.
It matches your eyes, Nemala.
Nemala pet the small rabbit youngling on the top of her white and brown hair. The young babe's long ears flickered with excitement as she scurried back to her mother's side.
Everyone here adores you.
The grey-haired elder muttered as she walked further away from the city square. But Nemala didn't respond. She only followed the grey-haired elder in silence.
It is just up ahead.
The grey-haired elder pointed to one of the few still dilapidated buildings left in the city of ruins. Once inside the dark, dank structure, Nemala turned around, eyeing how the weeds and vines had grown over the windows and corridors. Is this where the young ones are dealing catnip? The grey-haired elder walked further into the building but didn't reply. Nemala folded her arms. Her dark teal tunic was now soiled at its hem with dust and debris from the floor, but Nemala paid it no mind. Instead, she grabbed the hemline where her tunic split and ripped it a bit, giving her thighs more room. The grey-haired elder cackled with a voice that was not her own.
Was I that easy to discover?
Nemala removed the earrings adorning her ears and placed them in the pocket of her tunic. Unfortunately, you failed to realize a few small details. The grey-haired elder cackled once again. Her pale white fingers elongated into daggered claws.
Really? I thought I was quite convincing.
Nemala shrugged. For one, none of the kindred call me queen. For I care nothing about titles. The grey hair of the elder was now washed in bright orange flames.
Ha ha ha, well, it has been many years since I made use of this vessel.
The elder's eyes were now glowing hot embers. Nemala summoned forth her mana. For months she had been training with Miski, building up her endurance to lessen her power's backlash. The possessed body of the elder lashed out. Her sharp claws aimed at Nemala's head. But Nemala quickly evaded the claw strike. With a fierce kick to the elder, the possessed vessel stumbled.
Damn you, bitch.
Nemala whispered an incantation, then forced her mana out the tips of her fingers. A dark blue cloud of miasma rose from her hands, and she shot an energy blast towards the elder. But the vessel moved with extraordinary agility, leaping and bouncing off the walls and ceiling.
Interesting. It seems you aren't that simple.
I care not of your opinion of me. Nemala focused her power, allowing her mana to swell and grow within her soul.
Did you really think you could amass an army, and I wouldn't know?
Sweat dripped from Nemala's brow as she weaved layer upon layer of spells silently within her head. I was always suspicious of you, Elder. Everything you said was convoluted or biased. Your stories always contradicted everything the other kindred had known. The vessel cackled.
Those foul beasts know nothing. Just as you know nothing, you sow. Do you really believe that Abomination loves you? That you will be the last cunt he dips his pecker in? You are a fool to trust in a mere man. This is not your fight, whore.
With a growl, a searing blast of fire burned Nemala's tunic. The singed fabric left welts on her dark brown skin. I know that I am nothing like you. Your heartache has turned you into a madwoman. Where is your dignity? Then, with a swift roll, Nemala evaded the second strike, but quickly shot out the concentrated blast of her own. The immensity of her defensive strike caused the entire southern wall of the dilapidated structure to collapse. Ah! The elder screamed as her voice turned into a gurgled cry.
This is only the beginning.
Nemala stumbled out of the crumbling building. Blood spilled from the corners of her lips.
Here, she's over here.
Someone called the healer.
Nemala could feel her body being lifted by several hands. The voices of concerned women and men jumbled together as the outer edges of her vision darkened.
We must call King Griffin.
But he and his men are already in the capital.
Nemala pulled every sliver of strength she had to force herself to speak. Do not call him. He must defeat the Phoenix while she is weakened. At the last utterance of her words, she succumbed to her unconsciousness. Clang! Slash! A vicious battle was ensuing all throughout the capital. Avians, beasts, and insectoids were battling to the death.
For the glory of the mother!
Screamed an injured guard as he ran headfirst into Micah's united force. But he was swiftly taken down, reduced to nothing but a bloody pulp. King Peacock and his personal guards ran deep within the castle's hidden corridors. His dark green hair was tangled and dirted with crusted blood. The guard behind him cursed and muttered as the king's long plumage forced them to run slower.
My liege, we must hurry. The castle has already been overrun.
The king's wide eyes looked behind him. The flickering firelight from torches was closing in from the rear. His hands trembled as he tried to run faster. The sound of his hardened step echoed through the tight passage.
Here, my king, we've reached the exit.
Just as the king's guard stepped out, his head was knocked off his shoulders. Blood splattered and splashed the king's face as the avian guard's body slumped to the floor. The king stepped backward but was pushed forward by the guard at his rear.
Spare me, here you can have him.
The guard frantically yelled as he dropped his weapon and raised his hands in the air. King Peacock shook frantically. His long green hair fell forward, licking the ground as he begged the group of flightless men to spare his life. Goddard stepped forward, pushing Luke's blooded sword to the side as he approached the king.
We care not for your tears. Only your blood will be enough to pay the price of your sins.
King Peacock snapped open his feathers with a snarl, momentarily blinding the fire tribesmen at his flanks. But Goddard didn't flinch. With the pride of his people fueling him, he swung the iron hammer in his hand down hard. The temple was shaking. Priests were running around in disarray. Some were fleeing. But many were willing to defend the Great Mother till their last breath. Rohan pushed Micah to his left as an opposing knight's sword slashed through his left shoulder. Rohan screamed. Raven, hawk, and vulture surrounded Rohan, defending their fallen comrade with swords drawn. Micah's golden eyes glimmered in their beastly form.
Push forward, brother Griffin. We'll hold them off here.
Micah grunted, his muscles tensing with rage.
Stay alive, brothers.
The heavy golden door ripped apart like paper under the strength of Micah's side-like talons. Then, with heavy steps, he strode forward. His blood-stained wings furled around his body, acting as a natural shield. Swoosh! A fire blast scorched the outer feathers of his wings. Micah bellowed, a guttural roar, and swiftly turned his body. His golden scales swelled with mana. Suddenly, his entire body was covered from head to toe under the protection of impenetrable golden armor.
Damn you, abomination.
The Great Mother screamed as she flew towards him, her ivory talons swiping and slashing at him with voracity. Micah stumbled further into the room. His arms rose, blocking the insane goddess blows. Arg! She yelled again. She shot another fire blast from her hands, but Micah evaded. Leaping behind the large golden object lying on.
You are mad.
The phoenix flew down and landed on the other side of her bed. Her amber-colored eyes glowed with a manic expression.
You know nothing. Abomination.
I know you're nothing but a jealous hag.
Micah spit in rebuttal. The phoenix goddess screamed, refusing to hear his words.
It was all their fault.
Her ivory talons pointed towards the broken doors.
If not for those treacherous women seducing my husband away, he would be alive.
The goddess shot a fire blast towards Micah's face, but Micah evaded her fire strike.
You are the one that killed him, whore.
No.
Micah leaped into the air, pushing the sarcophagus into the phoenix goddess, then slamming his dagger-scaled fist into the phoenix's face. She stumbled backward, so Micah did it once more, using the sarcophagus as a battering ram, then shoved the goddess against the wall. The chamber shook with great force. The wall behind her splintered at the impact, but she kept fighting. Her fiery hands glowed red, melting the sarcophagus, blocking her way.
How dare a dirty-blooded cretin like you dare to question the ruler of this land?
The room suddenly turned uncomfortably hot as the goddess' entire body began to vibrate with manic energy. Micah's golden scales were singed brown from the heat of her power, but he never relented. With mana-filled screams, he continued to pummel her face. One strike, his daggered scales the next. His scythe-sharpened talons.
You will tire long before I ever will.
The phoenix cackled. But Micah smirked, his face reddened by her fiery power.
But what will you gain?
The goddess looked confused by his remark until she followed the path of his gaze. No! She screamed, her voice trembled in horror, at the melted and charred remains of her husband lay bubbling on the floor between them.
My love, what have I done?
The goddess wept, blood flowing from her golden orbs as she screamed to the heavens. But Micah cared not for her sorrow. He approached once more, pounding his powerful fist into her face and upper torso. The goddess was too lost in her delirium to fight back. Micah's fists were covered in pulp and blood. Even so, he fought. The goddess eyed him as her life force dwindled.
My life matters not. Once I die, this world will crumble.
With a rage-filled cry, Micah slammed his fist down for the last time, punching his fist all the way through her skull to the floor. Rumble, rumble. The walls of the temple shook violently. Hawk and Raven ran into the room, vigilantly searching for the goddess' presence. Micah rose to his feet, stumbling forward as the ground shook underfoot. Hawk ran to support his commander.
How is Rohan?
Raven walked over, lifting Micah's other arm over his shoulder for more support.
Vulture carried him to the healers, but your worry should be with us. The entire capital is burned.
Micah looked at them with confusion until he stepped outside of the temple. Then, finally, his legs gave way. Unable to fathom the scene before him, the lava from the wastelands was rolling into the capital, melting everything in its path.
Evacuate everyone to the dark forest. The city of ruins may be the only safe place.
Pride of a goddess, the surrounding space was nothing but a dark, endless void. There was no pain, no joy, nothing but silence. Rest now, Nemala. The familiar voice echoed through the darkness. There's no need to keep fighting. Nemala turned her head to the side, but nothing. No one was there. Her body felt light, for all her fears and burdens didn't exist here. But the dull ache in her heart began to swell. The more it pained, the lighter the dark spans became. In front of her shone a swirling aurora of lights, dancing faintly to their ethereal tune. Nemala, save your people. Nemala groaned as the pain in her heart grew in its intensity. Where am I? Save your people. You know who you are. The voice whispered again. But Nemala thrashed violently. No, let me rest. It hurts too much. Living only brings pain. Where is your pride, Nemala? Will your people suffer because you fear pain? Will you let Micah pay the price for your pride? Leave him out of this. Who are you? Nemala questioned out loud. For I am you. Nemala's heart thrummed with excitement and apprehension as her mind tried to understand what was happening. I am a part of you, a fragment of your soul stone. Buried deep in the chasm of this world, I waited. Waiting for you to be reborn. Do you not remember who you are? All that you have created, your great works, your long reign. Where is your pride, Star Empress? Pride. Nemala huffed, and what did that title or pride bring me? A cheating mate, a wretched sister. Why should I keep trying? Maybe you are too weak. For it takes strength to rule the heavens. What stands before me is nothing more than a sliver of the woman you once were. Nemala could feel her blood begin to boil as the voice berated her over and over, calling her weak and selfish. But she couldn't work up the nerve to take the fragment within her soul once again. Be mindful, Nemala, the longer you deny your true self, will require for more souls to be sacrificed. I didn't ask for this. Nemala threw her hands up in frustration. Yet here we are, Star Empress, for it was your pride that shattered your soul stone. With no regard to the outcome or repercussions of your actions. The voice grew louder and more menacing. In the hands of the wicked, your soul stone can become weapons. The lower goddess of this world intends to use me to resurrect her dead mate. To do so requires that I be tainted with the mana of this land. Tainted with the souls of the people. So will you wait as all you hold dear is sacrificed? Because you fear pain, you shy away from your own duty, goddess. The voice shook the space around her. Will you watch as this world, one of the many you have created, falls to ruin? Will you watch as Micah also dies? At the mention of Micah's name, Nemala screamed. Micah will not be harmed. Then embrace your pride, goddess. Nemala took a deep breath and nodded. Soon the vastness around her transformed into a blistering hot inferno. Nemala winced and groaned as her body was licked by the heat of the flames around her. Take me into you, Nemala. Take back your pride. Nemala reached her hand out, gripping the diamond firmly within her hands. Remember who you are. With one last breath, she plunged the diamond into her chest. The chasm around her rumbled and rolled. As lava spewed upwards, gushing over the edges of the chasm. The ground shook as the chasm violently erupted. Suddenly everything stopped. The vision before her was somewhat familiar. A dark sea was full of galaxies and nebulas, with radiant starlight dancing within the dark expanse of the cosmos. Remember who you are, Nemala. Take back your pride, the voice whispered within her inner soul. When the stone finally integrated with her soul, a swirling aurora of energy crashed into her body, forcibly tearing her mind and body to shreds. Every fiber of her being was destroyed and reformed over and over. The cosmos danced within the blood of her veins. The heavens infused themselves within the melanin of her skin. Then, with a blast of light, Nemala snapped her eyes open. The sound of weeping and the earth rumbling around her caused her head to spin. Her face was damp. She raised her hand to remove the wetness, only to hear Micah's booming voice calling her name.
My love, you're awake.
Micah helped Nemala sit up slightly. Her eyes took a bit of time to adjust to her surroundings. The room was full of all the kindred's burnt and injured faces. A fire tribe male clung to an older avian female. Fortis cradled a beast king child in one arm and Tora in another. Everywhere she looked, there was someone injured. The ground shook again, and everyone screamed. What's happening? Nemala questioned. Micah's jaw clenched as he looked down at the woman he loved.
With no goddess to support this world, it has begun to crumble.
Nemala gasped, is this what her fragment meant by sacrifices? She worriedly placed her hand upon Micah's fire-scarred chest. He, too, was severely injured. For behind him sat the remains of one tattered white wing. Fortis kissed Tora softly before speaking.
At least we'll all die free men. Free from the tyranny of the goddess.
A few people shared his sentiments, but the fearful cries and wails were once again sounded out as the ground rumbled. Micah squeezed the beautiful brown woman in his arms tighter.
I thought I lost you, the prophecy Nemala, we misunderstood. I have failed you all.
Micah wept.
Now the fates are determined to separate us again.
But Nemala didn't reply. Instead, she kissed the soot-covered arm he had placed over her chest. Help me rise. She looked at Micah with pleading eyes. Then, with an outstretched hand, he helped Nemala to her feet. Everyone watched as King Griffin stood next to his beautiful, dark-skinned queen. But there was no longer a throne to sit on. There was no longer a kingdom to rule. So their hearts felt heavy. Nemala straightened her back and let her mana flow through her voice so that everyone taking refuge in the city of ruins could hear. My name is Nemala. Everyone's eyes rose to watch her. Their fearful faces were full of expectations. But Nemala carried forth. I am the Star Empress, the ruler of the cosmos, the true creator of all worlds. Nemala could feel Micah's hand gripping her tighter, but she couldn't look back. She couldn't soothe him. For all the people needed her just as much as he did. I will not let your world crumble. Everyone looked around in confusion. What's going on?
Did she say she's a goddess?
The kindred whispered and questioned her sanity until Nemala shot her hand in the air. Brilliant starlight shone from her palms as a vision of the universes played in the air. The 3 moons and golden orb were but a speck in the vision's vastness before them. The kindred quaked and fell onto their faces as they screamed their praises to the Star Empress.
All hail the true goddess.
Nemala turned her body to face Micah. But he, too, fell to his knees, saluting her. Why is my husband kneeling? Micah's head snapped up in awe.
What did you say?
Nemala pulled him to his feet and kissed his stubble jaw. My dear King Griffin. What is a king without his queen? Micah flapped his single wing with a joyful shout and lifted his queen high into the air. Amongst the cheers of the kindred, the pair strode forth to heal the land.
Nana, what happened next? Come on, Nana, tell us the part about your wedding with Papa Griffin and how you, my daddy and aunties helped rebuild the kingdoms.
The little golden-haired eaglet cooed and begged as Nemala placed the scroll next to the hatchling's bedside. You already know the full story, little one. All of you have heard it a dozen times. The little eaglet whined.
But you skipped all the kissy face parts.
The youngling fluffed her wings and pouted her little pink lips. Her brown skin had a faint metallic sheen under the torchlight. Nemala smiled at the young child that looked so much like her grandfather. The disgruntled growl of the werpup at her foot meant that Nemala had upset both her grandchildren. Hush now, child, don't you growl at me. Nemala chastised the 2 children.
But I want to hear more.
The young pup whined. His floppy ears fell forward with disappointment. Nemala's voice took on a stern, motherly tone. Lapasei, Magnum, you both must sleep now. Your parents will return come morn. Just look at how your cousin Nashyla is sleeping so soundly. Nemala pointed to the black and white mare nestled sweetly upon her bed. Out of all her grandchildren, that